It's just another night for Supernatural Girlz. Real stories, real answers to life's biggest supernatural mysteries. And now for another exciting interview with paranormal experts from this world and others. Here's your host, paranormal researcher Patricia Baker, on the one, the only Supernatural Girlz.
Welcome, everyone, to a very exciting show tonight on Supernatural Girlz Radio. I am your host, Patricia Baker. I am here with my co-host, all the way from Tucson, Patricia Kirkman, famous numerologist. PK, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing fabulous. I just love it when you say I'm a famous numerologist. I'm going to run around with signed so everybody else will know it, too.
It's
right.
Fun. Well, we know all about how famous you are and how great you are. So it's fun. We've been talking and laughing for the last hour with our guests. Have we got a great show for everybody tonight? My gosh, our two favorite people in the whole wide world, Betty Luca. Well, her middle name, Andreasson, you know that one. Betty Andreasson Luca and her husband, Bob Luca. We love these people. They are amazing. And they're with us tonight for the entire show. And they're talking about their new book. It is called A Lifting of the Veil. And let us tell you, it's a great book. This is a page-turner. Isn't it a page-turner? You cannot put it down.
You can't put it down. And I'm one of these, I read in bits and pieces. I had to go through most of it before I could even put it down. So that says a lot for me.
It's tremendous. It's so personal, and it's so touching. And I know we both really felt that we were inside their world, Betty and Bob's world. And they wrote a beautiful story. Now, and it's fraught with their own personal challenges, their own personal hardships, and we're going to get into all of what happened. But mixed in with all of it are their paranormal experiences, the experiences with the beings, which each of them have had. Each of them have had their own abductions, their own experiences, one together that is written about in the book. And it's fascinating. Then we're going to talk about, a little bit later on, the government nonsense, right? How the government has harassed these people beyond belief. We're going to be talking about all of that tonight. So get ready in the chat room, everybody, with your questions. It's irnchat.com, irnchat.com. We will ask your questions for you on your behalf. If you have any questions for Betty and Bob, just write them in the chat room. That's irnchat.com. So, PK, numerologically, what are we up to? What's going on?
Well, firstly, we have to remember we're still in a retrograde, and that is going to be true until the 5th of September. Do remember, even though it ends the 5th of September, there's that bit of a shadow period afterwards. So, unless you're born in a retrograde, that's the only time we're lucky during these phases. Unless you're born in that lucky part of the retrograde, don't go purchasing things, don't repair things. Just get them fixed once it's over with. Did you hear me, Bob? Because it's not a time, it's a time for taking a look into things, but don't feel it's in concrete yet, because it isn't. You're going to change your mind. And especially for those that are Virgos, they're ruled by Mercury. So Mercury's got a lot to do with a little shake, rattle, and roll going on here. Also, those that have a life path, that is their month, day, and year of birth, added together, reduced to a single number being a 5, those people are doing great. Because there's luck that it's all about a high impact, major changes, getting things moving. So for those people, the retrograde's fine. If you're born in a retrograde, you have a luck factor, which is great, but you're only on top of an aces when you're in a retrograde. We have it the flip side. So we get those 3 months, give or take, with the retrograde. The rest of the time is balanced for us. For you that are born in a retrograde, it's just the reverse.
Okay.
How about that?
That's interesting. Yeah, so the rest of us will be beating our heads against the wall until September 5th and a little bit beyond.
I think you got it.
Yes. All right. Okay. So we know that now.
Important that if you're looking into things, know that you can look, research, but do not do until after the retrograde is over with. You don't want to do it again.
All righty,
that's
then.
my part of that good news.
Yeah, so we're going to sit tight through this retrograde. That is what we are going to do. Sit tight. Okay. Now, I wanted you to take a look at Betty and Bob's numbers because they have this amazing life path where they have had these experiences separately and together with alien interaction. They've had contact, they've been abducted, they've had close encounters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, however many there are. So they've had them all. So what's going on with their numbers that would lead to that?
Well, I'd have a hard time saying it would lead to that because many people may have the similar numbers or the same numbers. But what it is, their charts combine together. They unite very well for this type of thing. Neither one has a big ego. Both of them are ultra sensitive to what the world needs and what other people are looking for. Both like changes, but they do it creatively, and they're very open to things that are different. That's the first part. Where Bob is more able to push things out there, Betty pulls back on some of these things. She's just not too sure. But both of them are very sensitive to the world at large. And I think that has a lot to do with not only the situations they're in, but how they, it's kind of like when you go like this, it has to fit just right. And that's what they do. When they're together, they fit just right.
So that energy is harmonious, and somehow it's also attractive to these ETs. So
their ego, their sensitivity, their ability to deal with change, their feeling about the spiritual side and looking into things that are better for others and how to balance the world, they're both identical. Totally different names, totally different birthdays, yet those parts of their chart are identical.
How fascinating. Well, if you want a reading from Miss Patricia Kirkman, you can get one, and you can find her at patriciakirkman.com. She'll do a personal reading for you, tell you what to expect, what's coming up in the next year, where your pitfalls are, where your strengths are. So, patriciakirkman.com. I highly recommend it. Now, you are so welcome. Very interesting stories we posted this week on Facebook.
Yes.
We had the nasty fairies that were
little
kidnapping people. Yes.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that one.
We've heard this before. I know some of them are not that nice. And so you got to go read these stories. They're just amazing. I mean, they're taking babies, they're taking adults. Take a look at this story. It's on our Facebook page, Supernatural Girlz on Facebook. The other story, though, is more pertinent to tonight. And that one was a question for a headline. Are UFO abductees being secretly watched? Yes, I think we know the answer to that. They most certainly are. But here's a story that they wrote about this woman, Brenda, who was on her way home, and she was kidnapped by what she believes was the military. And she was taken to a facility that was abandoned. They took all these vials of blood from her, interrogated her, and finally set her free back to her car. But she had been drugged. She had been, again, had blood taken from her, and they demanded answers to all these questions about her own alien abduction. Right. So is the government doing that? Yeah, I think they are. And we're going to talk to Betty and Bob about that because they've had their own experiences through many, many years. And we're going to get to the bottom of this one way or another. So, but that was an interesting story. And again, she was sure she was taken to this abandoned facility. She said it just seemed like an easy place that she said for them to take her, which is horrible. Isn't that horrible?
It's scary to think that things like that are actually existing. We try to play it down, or we act like the person telling the story is a little off base, but there are too many things validating what we're seeing and hearing over the years that they can't shake their head and say it doesn't exist anymore.
I know, you just can't. And anybody with a brain has to know that these things are happening. The abductions between aliens and humans are happening. And also that the military or shadow government, whoever the heck they are getting involved in violating our human rights. That's what they're doing. Because to drug us, to take blood from us, to interrogate us in a secret facility, none of that should be allowed. This is not a third world country where these things should be going on. This is the United States of America. It shouldn't be happening here. But like you said, PK, it does. So
unfortunate.
I know, we're going to find out all the details here because, again,
Yes.
we have with us tonight these incredible guests. And I just want to read something to you that I found really touching. It is in, let's see, where are we? It's in the foreword of the book. And this is what this gentleman wrote about Betty and Bob. And he's saying, most of us are down here in the muck, struggling with it. Again, I'm taking this a little out of context. That's why Betty is such an inspiration to me. When I was at the depths of my depression, one of the things I did was read Betty's interviews and listen to her tapes, just to hear the sound of her voice when she was talking. I would look at the drawings she sent me. Betty's experiences are the thing you grab onto when you are sinking. What a beautiful statement to make. I mean, it's just lovely. And again, I've found this to be true. Betty and Bob are an inspiration to so many people that have gone through these experiences and don't know where to turn. And certainly their faith has gotten them through some of the toughest times. But we're going to talk to them. We're going to bring them on the show right now. So Betty and Bob, welcome to Supernatural Girlz.
Thank you.
Thank you both for having us.
Yes.
Oh, glad to have you in front of us tonight. Our audience, I know, is chomping at the bit.
Yes. We are so honored that you're on our show first. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to interview you about your great new book, A Lifting of the Veil, which is available on Amazon.com, along with The Andreasson Affair, which has been reprinted, so you can buy both of them on Amazon now. And I suggest you buy both because they're both excellent.
Excellent books.
So what was it that made you want to write this book? This is a little bit different. This is in your own words, and it's very personal.
Well, we're not writers, but I mean, things were happening and everything, and we wanted to get that information out to everyone. And it helped us by bringing it out.
Yeah, and it was more a chance to let people know how the phenomena and the government both affected us personally as a family, something that was not in the other books.
Yes, exactly. You know, there were a lot of personal details that you were kind enough to share with us. And as we were talking before the show, all the different moves you had to make, you moved from one state to another, you know, raising your 7 children, the horrible car crash, the death of your 2 sons, all of these things, and somehow you've come through it all. And I know Bob was with you for now. How many years have you been married? Long time.
39 years yesterday.
39 years. Congratulations.
Well, congratulations.
Just celebrated that anniversary. It's wonderful. And you two are a wonderful supportive couple. You're great for each other. And again, you both had these abduction experiences, the alien contact, but you've had a lot of paranormal things go on that you wrote about in the book, also things that weren't in the other books. So do you want to share a few pieces of that with our audience? You're going to have to buy the book, you guys, if you want to read all about it in great detail, because these stories are incredible. But there was one where the 2 of you were taken together.
That was in 1978 when we lived in Connecticut. And we were getting ready for bed. She was in the bathroom off the master bedroom, and I was sitting on the bed taking my socks off, and there was a whirring noise, a cyclic whirring noise over the house. So I ran over to her, not knowing why really, but I ran over and I put my hands up in the door jamb like this, and all of a sudden both of us started being lifted up. She wrapped her arms around me, and I grabbed her. We were pulled up together, and as we were being pulled up, color actually drained from us. And we got into this area, which turned out to be a huge craft. She was taken to an area where apparently there was an initiation or some type of learning program. And I was taken to another area by two very tall, white-robed beings. And looking at her, I couldn't tell who she was anymore because she turned into a golden figure, as had everyone else that was on the side where she was. So I couldn't tell her apart from anyone else.
Oh, my goodness.
She went through this initiation, which was almost like a game. I was taken into another room, and I was told by these beings that it was a privilege for me to be there because I was not that advanced spiritually. I hope they just meant at that time.
Yeah.
But
I'm sure that's what they meant, Bob.
they did tell me some things, for instance, that on this plane, on Earth, evil is a necessity. It exists for a reason, so that all of us have the opportunity to make a choice. Without evil, there would be no choice. So we have to be good or evil. And the choices you make determine the path that you will be on when you leave this plane. And they also told me you do, and they made it very clear, they said you do not die. The physical body dies, but the light being, and it's interesting they use that word light being because I've seen them and so has Betty. They said the light being goes on through a much, much longer, endless process. So that was basically what happened in 1978. Of course, it got more involved on Betty's part, but I wasn't there to see that. She can probably fill you in on what happened once she got over on that side.
Well,
But how much, before you go on, Betty, just let me ask a couple questions. How long do you think you were there? I mean, you must have had some missing time when you came back. Were you there for an hour, 2 hours, all night? How long was this abduction?
You know, we never really got to find that out because it seemed like we heard the noise, I rushed over to her, and then it was almost like I turned around and walked back to bed. However, if they are not on linear time as we are, so they can take you out at 8:01 and bring you back at 8:02, it's like no time has passed for you.
Wow. So
Amazing.
now, when you got back, did you look at each other and just say, what the heck just happened?
Exactly, because we didn't have memory at the time of the actual experience. We knew something was strange, and the noise directly over the house was highly unusual. It didn't sound like any aircraft or helicopter or anything like that. But all we knew was something unusual had happened. But that wasn't strange in that house. Sometimes on one occasion, we woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and the windows are all open, and the birds are outside chirping away like crazy at 3 a.m. And in the same house, both the girls, Bonnie and Cindy, had seen people, shadow people. We all heard footsteps. If we were downstairs, they were upstairs. If we were upstairs, they were downstairs. The most unusual thing in that house, we came down, the bedrooms were upstairs. We came down one morning for breakfast. All of the crown molding was on the floor. The nails were still in the wall. And our glassware, our glasses had little white squiggly marks in them like they were etched. And a big spaghetti pot, stainless steel pot with a rolled steel edge, had split right through the rolled steel edge. So something had to do that. It took some kind of energy or force or whatever. But that was only one of a few things. There's the electrical appliances in that house would work when they felt like it. The neighbors' kids were over with Bonnie and Cindy visiting. And they're in the living room, and the lights start going off and on, off and on. The kids ran home.
Scared, probably.
Yeah, the electric stove, sometimes would work, sometimes it wouldn't. And everything was checked, all the connections, the fuses, everything. There was never any problems found. The basement light there was a hallway going down to the basement. The light goes out. So I flick the switch a couple times. Nothing happens. So I put a new bulb in. First step, right? Flip the switch. Nothing happens. So I'm scratching my head trying to figure out what's going on. But I figured, the heck with it. We went to eat or something. Anyways, a short time later, light went on by itself. Another occasion, I chased a man, a full-bodied figure. I chased him into the basement. I saw him walk into our basement. Now, we had no outdoor entrance or exit to that basement. I got down there, no one was there.
Oh, my God.
So, and the girls saw these figures all the time in the house. The house was just plain strange. What was really interesting, and I'll let Betty tell you this, when we sold the house, she bumped into the woman that had purchased it, or her and her husband had purchased it after we left.
Mm-hmm.
And Betty can tell you what happened to them.
Well, yeah, I was at the supermarket and I was surprised to see her in line. And I thought, well, I'm going to see how she likes the house. And so I walked up to her and asked her, and she says, well, something has happened there. She said, one evening we went out and all the lights were put off. And when we came home, we went to open the door and every light in the house went on, from outside, down in the cellar, all inside. All the lights were on and they had shut them all off. So that was, I was kind of leery of asking her that question because I thought, here she bought the house and then she came out with that I thought, uh-oh. But at that time when Bob and I were taken up, I was taken up and I grabbed hold of him and we went up and we turned like there was colors all around us. And he went one way and I went another way. At that time, Bob's daughter, Wendy, was staying over with the girls. And I didn't know it, but evidently they too had been taken up. Because when I was taken up, I was changed into like a light being, a golden light. And there were other people there that were also like golden light. And they seemed to know me and me know them. And we would touch hands with our hands together. And it was almost as if we both and all of us had a promise about doing something. But anyway, there was this long, round walkway. And I had not seen Bob since we were taken up. And I happened to look over across the walkway because I was looking at 3 tables on the lower part of this room, and there were blankets over 3 girls. And I'm wondering what is going on. And at that time, I was starting to change. I was changed into a golden person. And I looked over further and I could see Bob along with 2 very tall beings with white hair and in white robes, and they were escorting him someplace else. I tried to yell to him, but no voice that he would know, and I'm waving my hands and everything, but he did not recognize me because I was just a light being. After that, they took him and I was all upset looking down because I knew it was the 3 girls they had down in that room and were examining them. These other golden light beings came over to me almost as if they knew what I was going through because of the girls. I was so upset. And as soon as
let me just ask you, Betty, let me just ask you a question. You say the 3 girls, do you mean your daughters or just 3 girls?
No, they were
3 girls.
My 2 daughters and Bob's daughter. She was staying overnight with my 2 daughters.
So they were the ones you were looking at, and that's why you were so upset.
I was upset over that, right. Yes. Yeah. And the beings came over to me, the light beings, and they held their hand on me, almost like a mother, and they were petting me, and it took away that fear and my thought about what was going on. And we continued around this edgeway into another room, and in this room it was like a banister, and it had these silver plates on it with lights. And what happened was the light beings started to lay back on these the rest of the banister. And so I thought I may as well do it too, and I did that. When I did, all of a sudden we tumbled backwards into a ball, and there was a ribbon of light that went down from this area into a very lower area, and we just rolled down that ribbon of light, and we became that color briefly. We stood there, and then we sat in a very strange motion. Our legs were fit in a very odd situation briefly. And then someone came, another one of the beings came, and they had all these tools, different shaped objects, and they were passing each one of us the objects. Then we were brought into another room, and one of the people, the beings that were there, they were given a rod with 2 points on it. And we didn't know what they were until the game started in the other room. It was sort of a game we were playing where we had to throw the objects, and then you had to grab one of them. And
it sounds so like almost like a, before you go on, because I don't want you to give away all the information. Mm-hmm. I want people to buy your book to get every detail. But this is a fascinating abduction experience, and that you have such a clear memory of all of these things that they did. So now let me ask you, when you all came back and you realized the girls had been taken too, did the girls have any memory of it?
No, I don't think they did.
Okay.
They were, because they never said anything to me.
Mm-hmm.
And at a particular time, I had not recall of the girls being there until I was on that walkway and saw the 3 of them
Wendy
down
had a
below.
dream about UFOs
She
that
did.
night.
Oh, Bob is saying Wendy, his daughter, had a dream that night of what had happened.
Okay, so she did have a little bit of a bleed through in her dreaming world about this. It's an incredible experience that you both have had, and you shared this together, although you were in 2 different parts of this spacecraft or whatever it was. But it's really, now again, we're going to take a break in a couple of minutes, and we've got some questions for you coming up in the chat room, so we'll get to all of it. But your thought is that they weren't trying to do anybody any harm, right?
No, definitely. No,
Okay.
it was a learning lesson for us.
Mm-hmm. So both of you were on a learning curve.
Over with the tall white beings
Yes.
with white hair.
And it's
I was with the
fascinating
golden
that,
people. We had
right.
that game, and then we came out of a door, and we came back in our own form. And I was
it's so
taken back down.
interesting that you saw the beings that Bob saw, and that you saw yourself as a being of light, and Bob saw you as a being of light. So there's quite a lot of corroboration here of this experience.
Right.
It's really fascinating. PK, what do you make of this?
I'm listening, and I'm thinking to myself, do you remember the house number of the place that you were living then?
You call, honey?
99 Draper Avenue.
99? Isn't
Yeah.
that strange? 9 is universal, and it's for the world at large, and it deals with this high spirituality of things.
My,
Very
how
interesting.
wonderful. Wow.
Different
Yeah,
places that
see,
you've
there
been when
it
things
is.
have happened. Let's take a look at the house numbers and see
Yeah.
how they connect with your personal years as well. See what was drawing what forward.
Well,
Yes,
that was really, really unusual. I mean, everything was different, you know, and it just kept moving. It was unusual.
But you guys, it's not just the house with you both, because I know you've had wild experiences no matter what house you're in. Maybe one house is more than the other, but in every house, I would put money on the fact that you've had paranormal experiences throughout, which is incredible. I think is a testament to your experiences in the past with the ETs. It changes your energy. But we're going to have to take a very short break. And so everybody stay tuned. Please write your questions in the chat room, and that is irnchat.com. That's irnchat.com. We will ask your questions on your behalf. And also go to our Facebook page It's Supernatural Girlz on Facebook, and take a look at those stories we've been posting all week. They are so interesting. Don't miss out on that. Sign up for our newsletter, The Fringe Files, which you can find on supernaturalgirlz.com. That is our website. Again, supernaturalgirlz.com. So stay tuned, everybody. You're listening to Supernatural Girlz Radio. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to Supernatural Girlz Radio. I'm your host, Patricia Baker, here with my co-host from Tucson, PK, and our incredible guests tonight, best buddies with us. We love these people, Betty Andreasson Luca and Bob Luca. They are the authors of a great new book, and it's right here. It is called, let me see if I can get it right in the camera.
Of the Veil.
A Lifting of the Veil. Yes, there it is. This is a book not to be missed. It is very personal. It is very touching, and it's very informational. It's got everything in it you want to know about these experiences, including the government and what they've been up to and how they harass people relentlessly that have been involved in this phenomenon. But right now we've got a couple questions from the chat room we're going to turn to. Now, this one is from Klaatu, who is saying, "Good day, Betty and Bob. Do you remember if your sense of smell, touch, taste, sound, etc. in this place seemed familiar, or could you detect something was out of place?" And this he was talking about with your abduction experience when you were both taken together. Do you remember anything that felt familiar?
Not really. Did you?
Well, not in that particular one. In an earlier one, I did notice the inside was cooler than it was outside, and there was a slight odor of almost like after a lightning discharge of possibly ozone.
Ozone, yes. Yes,
We've
heard this. We've heard this before about burning ozone, that when they're looking in on people, at least in the past, that you could smell the burning ozone. That's how you'd know they were around. So that's interesting you bring that up. Now, here's another question. This is from Betsy. Betsy's asking, Betty went through several horrendous tragedies that she felt the aliens had tried to warn her about. If they foresee events in the future and have such amazing abilities, why wouldn't they prevent these events? Is it our destiny?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, they told me that they wouldn't be able to change it. I did go through quite a few things. My two sons were killed in an auto accident. And now I've lost Becky, you know of Becky.
Yes.
And I had quite a few hardships because my ex-husband had just taken off, and I had a big farm to take care of, and so it was difficult.
Very difficult. And again, that's what I commend you on being, so giving about your personal life, sharing these details. Yeah. And again, when PK and I were reading this, it was like we were right there with you. But that's a good question from Betsy, because you do wonder, why don't they intervene? Why don't they help us out? And even with Becky, that was one of our questions when she had cancer. Why wouldn't they intervene with her? She was such a talented psychic medium. She went through these experiences of abduction with you. She had her own guardians around her. But when it came to this, there was really no help in sight, was there?
No, there wasn't. Becky had quite a few unusual things happen. And one thing, she used to take pictures of orbs outside her house. There were hundreds of orbs there, but the strange thing was, in each orb was the form of a cross. So I've never seen anybody do that before, ever take a picture like that. And there were hundreds of them out in her yard.
Incredible. Well, she was just such a great talent. She's completely missed here. I mean, we miss her dearly. And yes, she was able to do incredible things, speak and write in the angelic language and things like that. So, yes, we miss her terribly. And again, it is a question. We always ask, well, why didn't they intervene? And so here's Betsy asking the same question about you, Betty, and some of the things that you went through, but they explain to you they don't do that. So
let me ask a question. It possibly isn't, although they can't intervene, but by allowing you to be aware of it, they're preparing you in a way to make it less traumatic for you?
I think that is the case, yes.
Yeah, because that's what it feels like.
Yeah, very much.
Here is a question from Ben. He's asking, Bob, what did the white-haired beings reveal to you about the nature and purpose of animals?
Well, basically, what they said that we would be surprised if we knew the importance of animals, and that those people presently in our realm that mistreat them will be paying later. I don't know exactly what they meant, but there would be a severe penalty to pay for those that mistreated animals.
Very happy to hear that.
Me too.
Yes, because there's no excuse for that at all.
No,
and
definitely
these poor
not.
innocent animals. Yeah, that's why I'm glad to hear. That's great news. Yippee.
Mm-hmm.
So people should think twice before they try to take out their aggressions on a helpless and innocent animal. Well, that's good. Well, Ben, I hope that answers your question. So again, so many things have happened to you. I'm like, okay, my goodness, where do we go next? There's this wide field of experiences with you both. But let's take a look in at some of your experiences with the government. How about if we start with the helicopters?
Well, once the first book came out in 1979, our house began to be overflown by black helicopters, mostly Huey UH ones that had no identification numbers on them, which is against federal law. They got to be so often and so low that our neighbors, one of our neighbors who was a city councilwoman, started to document the times that these overflights took place. When I contacted Ray Fowler, he thought, well, maybe you just happen to be in a flight path. We moved from that house a year later to Cheshire, Connecticut, and lo and behold, we weren't there a week, and the flight started over Cheshire, Connecticut. They also followed us on vacation everywhere from New Hampshire to Florida. At times, they buzzed our car while we were on the road in rural areas. At one time, they passed over our car. 2 Hueys passed over us at approximately 50 to 60 feet of altitude, and that's kind of intimidating. I couldn't resist. I had to give the pilots the old single finger wave to let them know what I... But we also had some fun with them. I had a friend in the military that had a sense of humor like my own, and he made us an exact replica of a surface-to-air missile. Well, the helicopters usually approached our house from the north. So we set up this missile on the south side of the house. Now, I had flown over the house myself, and I knew you couldn't see where the cement pad was until you were pretty much over the house most directly. So we set the missile up there, and I told Betty, I'd watch. I said, this should be fun. Well, along comes this black Huey, low altitude. As he cleared the roof, I thought the blades were going to break. He pulled that into such a sharp right-hand evasive maneuver sideways. Told her, I said, I'll bet you that fella's on the way back to where he came from. He's going to get himself a shower and change his underwear.
I'm so pissed off with that.
Yes, they did not expect that. We had a little fun with them from time to time. But now most people have never found out exactly where these helicopters came from. There's a very elite Army unit called the Night Stalkers. And they are based out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky. There's approximately 300 helicopters at that base. It's one of the biggest ones, it's the biggest one in the country. The interesting thing is, for people that are familiar with the Betty Cash, Vicki Landrum case, where they were severely got radiation burns as this UFO hovered over their car, 23 Chinook helicopters showed up and escorted that thing away. Those helicopters had to belong to the U.S. government. Nobody else can afford to operate 23 of those helicopters. But the part that really irritates me, the government denied any involvement. Those women and the grandsons suffered severe radiation burns, skin blistering, hair falling out. The government would never admit to involvement. They never paid a penny for their medical care. And this all started back in Roswell. Want to believe that or not? Okay.
See, this is a huge problem. Now that craft was one of ours, and
Right.
something was malfunctioning, and these people got caught up in its wake, and they were harmed for sure. Yet we have all of this denial going on, and these poor people never get any medical support, any help. Now, I think one of them even passed away from the experience, didn't they? One of them did, yes?
I believe so.
Yeah, both
Yeah.
It was a
women.
boy.
But anyways, it's a terrible situation because not only do abductees, and we've talked about this a lot, get a lot of guff from everybody else who doesn't understand the phenomenon, but they also get harassed by the government. So you guys get it from all sides. You don't get any kind of a break with this.
Well, if we go back to Roswell, after Roswell happened, policies were set in place. The policies were ranged from denial, ridicule, and intimidation. Because of those policies, everyone in the future that reported something serious, and I'll start with Betty and Barney Hill, my wife and I, Herbert Shermer, police officer, he lost his job, lost his home, lost his wife. Lonnie Zamora, state trooper, had a highly credible sighting of a UFO on the ground. He was so harassed, he gave up his job as a state trooper and was managing a gasoline station. And right up to today, with Larry Warren, who reported the incident at Bentwaters, he is still being attacked to this day.
Terrible.
Because of policies that the government put in effect. And, you know, my view is, hey, it's because these policies have ruined people's lives, honest people that are reporting what they've seen. I think the government ought to be held accountable.
I agree.
Of course,
I think it's time.
It's going to happen. And one word about Roswell, too, that I'd like to get in, because people have been so misled. They think that the balloon supposed Project Mogul that crashed at Roswell was an isolated incident. It was not. The government contracted New York University not only to set up those balloon trains, but to figure the best way to control them and track them. And by control, I mean they wanted balloons that would stay between 30 and 40,000 feet. They had sonars of ours attached to listen for the Soviets setting off nuclear devices. That was the whole purpose of them. Well, in the first place, there was 110 of those balloons launched, and they're not still up there. So obviously they all came down.
Right.
When the one crashed at Roswell, supposedly crashed at Roswell, they said that Major Jesse Marcel couldn't identify neoprene balloons, plastic. The sonobuoy had an aluminum frame, an assortment of vacuum tubes, wires. The radar reflector was made of tin foil. Now, anybody in the military, especially that had a cigarette or a Hershey bar, knew what tin foil was. And yet they claim Major Marcel couldn't tell that this was okay. That's not bad enough. What I did find out, and is documented, every one of those things had a return to tag on them. The Army didn't want to be involved when they came down, so they had return tags that said return to New York University. Now, is our military that stupid they couldn't read that at the time? I don't think so.
Yeah, they couldn't read a tag. Yeah, exactly. No, that's a very good point, Bob. It's an excellent point.
Yeah.
It's beyond insane that they get away with this. It is beyond insane that they get away with it. Now, here's a question again. It says, many abductees have the unusual Rh negative blood type. Does Betty, Bob, or any other family have this blood type?
My dad did.
You guys are
I think my sister
your
Violet
dad.
Betty's sister Violet.
Yeah, I think twins were born. My sister Violet and a boy, and the boy was born still a baby. So
Stillborn.
it was because of that.
So yes, that's the answer. Now, here's the rest of the, excuse me, the question. Are there hybrids coming into our world now? Because you talk about eggs being taken, fetuses being taken. Are the hybrids coming into our world? That's what they want to know.
Well, you know, I can't speak on that personally because I don't like to speak on anything that I haven't experienced or researched. It appears that's the case, but I mean, there's no way I could tell anyone for sure that that's it.
Sometimes I think I'm a hybrid. I do because of a few facts. My mother had, when she was younger, it might have been a dream, but she said there were these small people on her bed walking in a circle saying different things, and she thought they were swearing at her. Now, it could have been a dream. The only thing is, after that happened in Ashburnham, the investigators wanted to know if they could speak with my father, because of course he was the first to see them coming down the hill. And so I asked my mother, and I said, Mama, do you mind if they come over to see you? She said, no, Betty, don't send them over here. And she wasn't talking about the investigators. She thought I was talking
about the little people. So she was scared of them.
Yeah, she was quite afraid because she was in the living room when they came in as well. They put my mother and the children in a state of suspended animation.
This might
which is
be another coincidence.
Go ahead.
But my mother also had an experience where she remembered the inside of a craft, but she would never undergo hypnosis. She was afraid of it until the day she died. She would never talk about it or never undergo hypnosis, even though we tried to get her to go several times.
Oh, what a
coincidence,
shame.
maybe.
Well, they say that this is, but I think this is intergenerational. We've had enough guests on the show that have, David Jacobs, who've talked about this, and they say it just goes from one generation to the next. So certainly it would make sense. It's in both of your families.
Yeah.
Here's another question for you. I don't know what this one is about, but here's another question. It's, what do you think is going on in Marfa, Texas? I don't know. You guys ever hear of something going on in Marfa, Texas?
Yeah, they talking about the Marfa lights? I assume that's what they're talking about.
Oh, that's what it is. You're right.
Yeah, they said that a scientist tried to explain them away as reflections of car headlights miles away and all, but the Indians had been reporting those for hundreds of years, and there were no car headlights at that time. It's some type of either natural phenomena or something that we just don't understand scientifically.
Okay, thank you for that. Now here's a question for Betty. Betty, most of your experiences seem to involve the topic of spiritual growth. Will you please give us some idea of what exactly spiritual growth means to you?
Well, in 1967, when I had that experience, the one in the light had spoken to me. I feel that God is involved in all of this. We don't know why, and why it's happening the way it is, but I do feel that he is very much involved in all of this going on. So we shouldn't fear.
Okay, so that's important, because I know a lot of people do get afraid of this experience, and some people have not had good experiences. You've had a pretty unusual experience, both of you, this way, where you weren't tortured. So that's good. But you did have some startling things happen, and that's all in the book, about your eye being taken out and them putting some kind of device in to your brain, so that it wasn't all, a walk in the park for you either. But you were able to somehow work with all of this information and still feel like things are being done for good.
Right. Well,
and
in
this was not an evil thing.
In 1967, when I stood before the light, I heard the voice say to me, "I have chosen you to show the world." Now, 50 years have gone by, 50 years. And I was saying to Bob, what am I supposed to show? He says, you've already fulfilled it. He says, you've telling people what has happened to you. You've fulfilled that already. So
right.
Felt a lot better after you said that.
Yes, and it's true. And you've come through so many of your own hardships, and we all have them in our lives. But again, you're a shining example, both of you, to everybody who goes through hard times, and know that you can come out the other side of it. Now, here's another comment. The government continues to be in denial. And if Betty and Bob didn't experience alien beings, why bother harassing them and others? Obviously, their story is true. Supposedly, there are 65 alien types visiting Earth, some benevolent and some malevolent. What do you think about their agenda for our world?
I think the most honest answer is that none of the investigators out there really have a clue, because the fact there are so many, each one probably with their own agenda, and that makes it very difficult to sort out just which group is doing what. As far as are they here, you know, a lot of people may not listen to people like Betty and I or others that have had experiences. But you have to remember, you have people like Werner von Braun, who got us to the moon, admitting that there's aliens. You have Ben Rich, who was the head of Lockheed Skunk Works, who said not only do we have alien technology, but we have the means to fly among the stars now. You have astronauts that have come forth with their stories. Absolutely, they're here. Do we know exactly why? I don't think anyone knows the whole story as yet.
Yeah, we'd like to know, though. And then we had, in 60 Minutes interview, Robert Bigelow came out, the billionaire who works with NASA, and said they're here. And the interviewer said, where are they? And he said, they're right under our noses. Mm-hmm. What an interesting response, right?
Very true.
So, yes, they're right under our noses. So, yeah, the hybrids, according to David Jacobs, are here. And there's a lot happening, but I know you two have been at the forefront of this for so long, and you have so much more to share. We want to get into more of the government harassment, the Men in Black experiences that you've had, the fact that you two were drugged in your own home. We want to hear more about that. As horrible that is, it definitely happened. And I'm also a witness to this, because this is how I met you guys. When I was called into the investigation years ago, there were black helicopters over my house 3 days after I met you for the first time in Cheshire. And they were flying so low that they bent the trees over, the backwash bent the trees over to the point where they touched the ground. So I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm a witness to it. It's all true, and we're so happy to have you here on the show with us tonight, letting everybody know what's going on. And again, everybody, here's a new book, A Lifting of the Veil. Get your copy on Amazon, and also get a copy of the Andreasson Affair reprint by New Page. That's there as well. Don't miss it. I mean, this is great information. We're going to get to as much as we can in the rest of the show, but right now, we are about to take another short break. So again, please visit our Facebook page, give us a like, follow us, go to the Fringe Files and sign up for that newsletter. I promise I'm going to be doing it regularly. I promise. It's been a lot to get out the door lately, but I promise I'll do it again, and you guys will be on alert for all the new things that we're going to be doing, which are incredible coming up. But tonight's show is stellar. I'm glad you're joining us. So hang on to your seats, and we will be right back for the most exciting part of the show. More government harassment. You will not believe it. It is incredible. Stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to Supernatural Girlz Radio. I'm your host, Patricia Baker, here with my co-host, PK, and our great guests we love so much, Betty Andreasson Luca and Bob Luca, and we are talking about their new book tonight. It is called A Lifting of the Veil. A great book, very personal book. Don't miss it. Make sure you pick that up, and a copy of the reprint of the Andreasson Affair, so that you can have all the latest and greatest information. And we were talking off the air about the information that, Betty, you received from the beings about their propulsion. Now, Bob, you were explaining it and what it really means. So,
yeah, in 1967, when Betty was shown their craft, this particular craft. They showed her that part of the propulsion system consisted of a huge, well, it looked like a donut. That is the best way I can describe it. They went completely around the inside of the craft. And this donut was filled with liquid mercury and rotated at a very high speed. Well, nobody paid attention to it in the first book because people weren't aware. But today, we have an aircraft called the TR-3B and several other models, offshoots of that, that in fact use liquid mercury rotating in a cylindrical tube, because what they found is that when it's revved up high enough, under high atmospheric pressure, it negates gravity by 89%. And no one knew that in 1967, so that kind of got missed when the first book came out.
Amazing.
And you can verify today very easily.
Exactly. And it's
And then recently,
exactly. And this is right in line with Betty Hill's star chart too.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Recently,
Yes.
my daughter was over, Bonnie was over, and she was going over her sisters for Thanksgiving. And we happened to talk about when they were kids, they were wondering where the cellar door was to get in the old house that we had. We changed a lot of the house. And so anyways, she told me that when they lived there, they were outside, the kids found mercury in the yard. And they were holding it and playing with it like Play-Doh.
Oh, no.
I didn't realize. I said, why didn't you tell me that's poisonous, you know? And I thought also the craft that landed up in the back of the house on a slight hill, perhaps that was some of their mercury liquid in some way leaking out in the lawn or the ground below, because grass would no longer grow there. So.
Oh, yes, exactly.
I don't know what happened
That's
to
quite
it, because
possible.
whatever government or somebody took all that whole land away. It now goes down like this when it was a big hill where the craft had landed. So they must have taken the soil to find out if there was any leakage like that.
Or if there wasn't, they had to remove the soil.
They've got their hand in this.
Yeah.
Yes,
It seems as if they were constantly watching us. I also had some other drawings that I made of the craft, and when we were gone, we were going to a lecture. When we got back home, we were living in the trailer at that time. Somebody broke in, and they didn't take anything of value except one or two of those drawings that I had drawn.
They took the drawings. See?
Yeah.
There's something interesting there.
Now, you...
I just wanted to say that that was in a rural area, so we had to call the state police, and we told him that we were involved in it. And he said, well, if I find something out, I will tell you. A week later, I went down to the trooper's office, and I was informed by another trooper that this fellow had been transferred, and they didn't know where they could get in touch with him. And that happened with the Federal Aviation Administration as well. These people just disappear and or have no memory.
Yeah. Incredible. So anybody who wants to help you out, they try to get them out of the way. Now, you had an experience also in your own home, which is horrific. I'd love for you to tell that story. And people need to hear this. They need to know that this is what our government or shadow government, whoever the heck they are, this is what they're doing.
What, which experience were you referring to? You broke up a little bit. I didn't hear the beginning.
You were drugged in your own home.
Oh, okay.
The night that you both went to sleep, you heard the noise, you went for your gun.
We're living in Cheshire, Connecticut, and we had retired for the evening, and it was pretty late, probably 2, 3 in the morning, something like that. I distinctly heard two men talking in our kitchen. Now, the kitchen was outside of our bedroom was a small hallway, and then the kitchen was off to the right. I could hear these men clearly. So I looked up. We had a large Belgian Shepherd dog. He weighed about 90, 95 pounds. The dog got up, his front paws slid out from under him, and he fell right on his face. So I said, oh, this can't be good. So I reach in my nightstand to get my pistol, and the next thing I know, it's morning. I have a terrible headache, and Betty got up, and she had a terrible headache as well. Because I said, wow, that's like a hangover, but without having anything to drink. So we went to our respective jobs. At the end of the day, she came home, I came home, and she said, gee, she said, my left arm has been hurting me all day. And I said, that's funny. I said, my right arm has been really paining me all day today, too. Because she's right-handed, I'm left-handed. So we took off our shirts, and right about in the place where you usually get a normal needle or vaccination, there's a puncture mark and approximately 1.25 inch diameter black and blue mark around it, on both of us. Well, later on, I had a chance to talk to our family doctor, and I asked him, I said, should we have gone to the hospital, or, you know, could that have shown what was injected into us? And he said, no, by that time, it just would have, it wouldn't have shown up on any test. And why we were left in a bad way here, we thought, well, we could call the police, but then again, are the police going to believe you? You know, somebody came in a house and put you out with a drug. They knowing that we're in the UFO phenomenon, they probably would have thought we're nuts. So we just had to let it go. But I just wish I was awake a little bit longer, because government agency, government agent or not, being in our house like that, I would have shot the person.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable that they would attempt to do this, that they did it, and they get away with it. I mean, it's to me, this is unconscionable. It really is. It's a horrible thing. And then at the same time, they're speaking out of both sides of their mouth, because on the one hand, they're saying there's no such thing as UFOs. On the other side, they're following you. They're shadowing you like crazy. And the reason I think they're following you guys is because Betty has been able to draw details. Yeah. She's been able to remember details. And so that fine artist eye that you have, Betty, and all the drawings and paintings you've done, I'm sure that drives them crazy, because you have all this information.
One of the things that they will see in the book, and I'm not going to give away anything here, but there is proof that the FBI was keeping a file on us, even though neither of us has any criminal record. And then the Department of Defense hacked into our home computer twice in 48 hours. And if people see the book, they're going to be very surprised at what agency within the Department of Defense hacked into our computer, because you do not see that every day.
You don't, and you're the only people that we know that have actually been able to catch them in the act. You've been able to do that. So again, here's the book, everybody, A Lifting of the Veil. If you want to see the proof, it's in this book. You will see the documentation that Betty and Bob have, and it is quite compelling. Now, you see, I'll tell you another thing that bothers the heck out of me with all of these things. You know, I contacted a CBS producer about this,
correct,
about the hacking of your computer, and that you had proof. And I went through the whole story with him. And here was his response. I wanted to throttle him. He said, oh, well, they had a UFO experience. Well, then I think it's the government's right to do this. I was like, oh, really? Why? I don't think so. I don't think it's the government's right. These people have broken no laws, and there's nothing that says that UFO abductees should fall under some surveillance and be drugged in their own home and have helicopters intimidating them on the roadways and wherever they are in the United States. That's crap. And so he ended up not doing the story on CBS News about this. But I was like, well, I'm glad he didn't, because what kind of story would he produce? That abductees should be under surveillance? But this is the mentality. I think some people don't get it. You know, they don't understand that this is against the law. This is invasive. This goes beyond NSA listening to our phone conversations. This is so much worse than that.
This is why your show and others like it are so important, because people can be informed. And I'll tell you, I I did contact CBS, ABC, NBC, MSNBC, the Huffington Post, newspapers, because the FBI had time to look into the Houston Astros hacking into the computer of the St. Louis Cardinals. Mm-hmm. And that was a story. Right. That was a nationwide story on the news.
It was huge. Yes, right. That's right.
When the Department of Defense
but hacks into the bothered with this
of law-abiding citizens, nobody wants to know. Didn't even get one reply.
It's unconscionable. Like I said, I'm appalled, and I'm still looking for a reporter in one of the news outlets to handle this. But this is why nobody trusts the mainstream media, because they won't report on things like this. And people do know that they're happening, and we're sick of it not being reported. This needs to be reported. This should be on 60 Minutes. This should be on Fox News. This should be everywhere. So people know that this is what our government's been doing. And God bless the two of you for coming out with this great book, and telling more of the truth.
Well,
so
one thing I'd like to mention, as I told you, there were a few humorous moments in all this. One night, the psychiatrist that originally had examined Betty was passing through our area, and he called us at about 9 o'clock at night, and he said, "I'm in the area." He said, "I'd like to come visit with you." So sure, we went and met him and led him to our house. To make a long story short, he stayed till about 5:30 in the morning. During the night, there was a huge crash in the kitchen. Nobody was home. There was just Betty and I and the psychiatrist, so that was a pretty good witness. But later on, when he was getting ready to go home, we were out in the front yard. It was about 5:20 or so in the morning. And we're still talking, and there was this huge cigar-shaped cloud over the house. And it wasn't moving. Even though other clouds were, this was just stationary. And you could see the edges of the cloud got thin, and you could see the stars through it just a little bit. And this thing was large. It was probably a quarter of a mile long or so. Yeah. Well, we're talking, and finally, the psychiatrist turned and he looked. He said, "Did you people see that?" I said, "Yeah, but I wasn't going to mention it until you saw it first."
Oh, that's great. Oh, gosh. You have to keep your sense of humor with this stuff. Otherwise, I don't know.
You knew Larry Fawcett.
And now you've also... yeah, we miss Larry. Passed away.
Yeah.
Yeah. He and his wife Lois were over for dinner one day, and we're sitting. This is in the house in Cheshire, and there was a etagere with glass shelves on the side opposite Larry, and there was a little bell there, like a dinner bell. It was made out of glass, and it had, of course, a little clapper inside. Well, the bell started to ring. Larry is very scientific mind oriented. He's been trained in criminology, police investigation. He jumps up and he runs over to the shelf and looks. And problem is, there were bottles of liquor and other liquids on the shelf. They weren't disturbed at all. Yet this bell was ringing, and he had a problem with that.
I bet he did. God bless Larry. He was great. Yes. Now, also, you had an experience with the Men in Black, right? You had a couple of experiences with them.
On one trip to Florida, we used to drive from Connecticut, or I'd drive from Connecticut to Pompano just straight through. But this one trip, we hit road construction, accidents, and by the time we got to Lake Worth, I was just so exhausted, I couldn't hold my eyes open much longer. So we got off of 95 onto Lake Worth Road, and it was a beautiful campground there, a Lake Worth campground. So I pulled in there. I went in to get us a room. I mean, a lot. And while I was in there, two people were talking about a UFO sighting over the campground on the previous evening.
Oh, my.
Well, I was so tired, I didn't want to get involved in any conversations, so I just paid for our lot, went and parked the car. And in Florida, the way the lots are lined up, the roads were east and west, and the lots were north and south. So as I pulled the car in and parked it, the compass was on just about due north. Well, Betty and I were sitting there for a while. The car we had seats that folded down. It was fairly comfortable. We thought we'd get a good night's sleep, get a shower in the morning, and be on our way. Well, we're sitting there, and all of a sudden, this baseball-sized ball of light comes right through the driver's door of the car. And it's multifaceted. It looks like a disco ball. And it floated silently in one side of the car and out the other. So she saw it, I saw it. I said, it's not a hallucination. So we just thought, well, make a mental note of that. And we're off to sleep we went. Well, about midnight or so, I heard a car door close, or it sounded like a car door closing, and I looked out back, and a black or dark-colored Cadillac had parked almost at the back end of our car. So I figured, well, somebody's trying to beat the campground out of their feet, or just going to have a nap and take off. About 3 or 4 o'clock, I think it was more like 3 a.m., I needed to use the restroom, and it was probably about 20, 30 yards from where our car was. I got out of the car, locked the door because Betty was fast asleep, walked to the restroom. I'm walking back, and I noticed the Cadillac had New York license plates. I didn't get the number, but it was a familiar yellow plate with New York on the top.
Right. Uh-huh.
As I got to the left rear of the car, all 4 doors opened exactly at the same time. 4 men got out. They looked like they were stamped out of the same mold. They had on black suits, white shirts, thin black ties, rimmed hats, and they looked Asian, and they were extremely thin. I mean, very, very thin. And as I'm walking around the car, they're looking at me, and I'm looking at them, and I really didn't feel any fear or anything. They looked like a good wind would probably have taken off with them. As I walked by the front of the car back toward our car, they went around the vehicle like kids playing musical chairs. They actually went around the vehicle and all got in on the opposite sides from where they started and shut all the doors exactly at the same time. It sounded like one door had shut.
Wow.
In the morning, what was interesting, first thing I noticed, the time on our clock, the digital clock, had gone 20 minutes ahead. I don't know how that happens to a digital clock. Our compass was no longer pointing north. It was pointing almost east.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, so I had talked to electrical engineers after when we returned, and they said the only thing they could think of was possibly some type of electromagnetic pulse or something like that. But I wish we could have gotten a hold of some investigators at the time, because there was evidence right at the moment it happened. But, you know, you can't always get somebody to come down and look at it.
I know. And also, that was long ago, and we didn't all have cell phones to take pictures and things like that. So we didn't have the same support to get this stuff as it happens. And you also, though, you had the FBI showed up where you worked when you took off in the middle of the night to go to Florida. Nobody knew you had gone. Mm-hmm. And the FBI shows up the next day, and they're like, where is Bob Luca? I mean, what the heck is that about?
Well, it was interesting because when we got back, nobody knew that we went to Florida. So we left about 2 o'clock in the morning. They lost track of us. We got back. We went to the FBI building, the federal building in New Haven. The agent came out to talk to us, and of course they said, well, we can't confirm or deny that we were at your place of work. Well, gee, the guys had photo ID that were there and talked to several of my coworkers and supervisor. And then, since we were there anyway, I asked him, I said, well, why are you guys tapping our phone? And he said, well, we didn't tell him anything about the UFO phenomena, just our names, and we came in. He says, well, we always get blamed, but in your case, it's probably Air Force intelligence. That's what the FBI told us. When I talked to someone in Air Force intelligence, they said, no, we'd have to get a court order. More than likely, it was the FBI.
Oh, Lord.
I believe it was probably Air Force intelligence, because Betty and Barney Hill's phone was tapped by Pease Air Force Base, by Air Force intelligence from Pease Air Force Base. So it probably was. So now we got all the military in, and this. I wanted to question the CIA also. because I think they were involved too. And I called and asked for an interview, for an appointment. They turned me down stone cold with no reason whatsoever. They wouldn't even talk to us.
Can't imagine that.
I mean, you know, we're nobody. We're just a working guy and a wife is an artist, and they wouldn't even talk to us.
What?
And one other thing, real quick, Betty and I were at Cape Canaveral. We wanted to see what some of the stuff NASA was doing. Went to the desk and told the officer that we were doing a book and we would love to do an interview with the administrator if it would be possible. And I was amazed. He said, yeah. He called down. He said, he's there. You can talk to him.
Wow.
We were amazed. So Betty and I were booking it down the hall. It seemed like a half a mile to the guy's office. We got down there. We were met by a secretary who was visibly nervous. Oh, he's not in now. Probably somebody recognized us.
Yeah.
Because he did not, the administrator of NASA skipped out on us.
Yeah.
What are they afraid of?
Yeah, what are they afraid of? Well, they don't want us to know what they know, but we know it anyways. I mean, that's the thing that it's so funny to me. We know what's going on anyways. I mean, to think that they can keep it from us anymore, they really can't.
Well, the beings, we've had some other things happen with portals. Two psychics have said that we had 2 portals in our cellar because at nighttime you would hear a party going on, you know, and the dog would bark and all these things would happen. Well, these 2 portals, you close it.
And
one
it's on
other.
we recorded.
Yeah. I forget about that. But anyway, there was another time that Bob was looking at a piece of property we have in Bassett. And then he, on Google Earth. And then he decided he was going to see how our property looked. Well, when he took the Google Earth picture, here's this big, huge portal that is over our deck in the upper part of our car garage.
My God.
We have the picture of it.
Huge. Well,
you got
all silver.
Send us the picture so that we can post it. Yeah, we are going to want to post that on Facebook and show everybody the portal that's over here. I think these things also follow you wherever you go. So I'm hoping you make it up to Massachusetts this fall, and we're going to see what happens if you do. I think it's going to be great. But can't thank you enough for coming on the show tonight and talking about
our pleasure. Believe me. Thank you so much.
A Lifting of the Veil, everybody. You've got to get it. It's a great book. And also pick up the Andreasson Affair reprint while you're at it. Next week, we have Simeon Hain, PhD. He's a sociologist. He's investigated the paranormal, UFOs, etc. He's coming on to tell us what's going on and why we have such a hard time integrating these experiences to our lives. So we have another great show coming up next week. And again, thank you, Betty and Bob, and everybody else. Until then,
thank you, Patricia and PK.
You are so welcome.
We
will see you on the Blue Highway, everybody. This has been great.
God bless you both.
Night. God love you.